So 2023 is now in the rear view mirror. I've done my best 5 films of the year. Now let's do my worst 5 films of 2023. But before I get into a top 5, let me mention a few films that didn't quite make the list, with the first one being Luther the Fallen Son. Now before watching this film, I watched the whole series of Luther, and this compared to the series was such a downgrade. And we've seen this before with some TV shows turning into films. They don't really match up to that quality, and here is definitely one of those. And I'll be surprised now to see if we get any more Luther films because of how bad this one was. Now my next mention are 2 films, and the reason for that is because both of them have the same sort of space in my brain where I've pretty much forgotten the whole movie apart from maybe the odd scene here and there. And those films are Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Now with Ant-Man in particular, that should have been such a better film considering this was the film where we get introduced to Kang the Conqueror, and it was just such a letdown. Especially with Ant-Man, I've enjoyed the first film and I thought the second one wasn't that great, but there was some potential there with Ant-Man as that character, but I don't really remember anything he did in that film at all. And then Shazam! Fury of the Gods, I mean, the first film I quite enjoyed, but this one, that's really lacking the fun. It was just sort of another slog to get through. And now I do have a comic book film on my list, which I think is worse than both of these, but in terms of comic book films this year, it's been a pretty bad one. Another film that I couldn't leave out from this video is The Nun 2. Now looking back on this film, I remember one decent scare, and that was where we had the nun on the magazine stand, which was in the trailer, so it wasn't much of a surprise, but the rest of the film really did fall victim to what we've seen before with these Conjuring films, where it just becomes a something bang movie, and it gets pretty boring after a while. And I'm hoping if we do get another Nun film, they have a bit more inspiration behind it. And the last film I want to mention before we get into the list is Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Now before anyone starts getting the pitchforks out, the reason I've added this here is because this was one of those films where I was really against the majority and I just didn't really like this movie. I actually wanted to leave at one point. I thought the film was pretty bad. I thought there were some decent scenes where we had the graveyard, which was a good comedy moment, and some other ones sprinkled in there towards the end. But I'm not a D&D player, and I think that maybe had an impact here because I just really could not get into it. And I think for many people this might be a film on their best list of the year. But this one was definitely one where I had a lot of people saying, you're in the wrong. But I don't know, I haven't seen that many people talk about this movie since it came out. It's been quite a while now obviously, but I haven't seen it really being mentioned so much in terms of the hype, where we had some films where the hype really continued for months on months. This one sort of did trickle out quite quickly. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this film? Because like I said, I was really against the majority. A lot of people did like it, but what did you think? So now let's get into the top 5 worst films of the year, and at number 5 we have Meg 2: The Trench. This film did eventually get to that wackiness level I was hoping for, but it took a bloody age to get to that point, and it was such a bloody bore fest walking through the whole trench portion of the film. My god, that would put you to sleep every single time. Jason Statham was trying. There's some pretty stupid things happening down there, which you'd hope to see, but it wasn't fun bad, it was just bloody bad. And yeah, if they do another Meg film, just go for the bloody wackiness and do it from the off. That's what we want to see. That's why we're here to watch a Meg film. We're not here for the bloody boring setup. Next up in number 4 we have Peter Pan and Wendy. This film went straight to Disney Plus, and from the off you can understand why, and that's because it is so lacking in quality. I did actually watch the 1953 version not long before watching this because I was doing a retrospective video for it, and so I could really see the comparison between the two and how bad this one fares in comparison. And I think especially when you look at characters like Tinkerbell, what they've done here is just they've done nothing new and inspirational. I mean, they did try something with Captain Hook, but it never really worked. And so I think if you are going to watch Peter Pan in the future, just watch the animated classic or just watch bloody Hook. I mean, Hook is fantastic compared to this film. Even the 2003 version I think deserves some credit as well. So yet another Disney live action remake that pretty much was dead on arrival. And speaking of Disney, in third place we have a Marvel film titled The Marvels. I don't think I've ever sat in a cinema watching a Marvel film where I felt so old when I did watching the Marvels. I really did feel like maybe I've grown out of these movies, but there was just so much nonsense here and so much crap. I mean, we had the whole cat thing, the musical planet, the bloody villain was one of the worst villains I've ever seen, especially when it comes to Marvel. I mean, they've had some pretty bad ones, and it just felt like such a stupid film to actually be watching, because it's like, they don't really care, no one really is bothered with this movie, there's not much at stake here. Everything just felt so flat. And even towards the end, it's like, oh, you know, another reveal. But I'm like, I don't care. Who cares at this point? You've bloody teased so many different characters in the past few films with these end credit scenes. Why should I bloody care? And at this point, I was just sat there thinking, I don't care. I just don't care anymore. And so I just felt like I was wasting my time watching this movie.
Wankers! Fucking embarrassing. Waste of our time. Fucking waste of our time.
And on the subject of not caring, let's get into our number 2, which is The Expendables 4, or The Expendables. This film is absolutely one of those where those involved weren't asked a question about whether they wanted to make something creative and make something really innovative and make something amazing for the fans. Nope, this was one of those where they were asked, do you want some work? I mean, Sylvester Stallone is on the bloody poster, but he pisses off for most of the film, and so you've just got Jason Statham trying to make something out of these scraps, and then you've got like Megan Fox and the rest of the cast just fumbling around all over the place. You've got some decent action stars here as well, but they're just not doing anything interesting. The whole plot is, non-existent. I mean, oh my goodness, this was such a chore to sit through, and just a big F you to the audience.
Fine. Well, you have extra sensitive hearing. Hear this. I'm telling. I said vacuum!
And so let's get to the biggest pile of crap of 2023, and that was The Exorcist Believer. Now this film is a sequel to the horror classic The Exorcist, and even Ellen Burstyn returns in a sort of Jamie Lee Curtis type role like we saw in the Halloween franchise, and this film was apparently supposed to be the first of a trilogy. Don't think so after this, because the plot was bloody crap. Ellen Burstyn's in the film, and her character gets blinded because she gets taken into the house in an action scene. Like, what is she doing there? What's going on? There's 2 girls this time, so more the merrier. Not in this case, not at all. It's not scary. I mean, The Exorcist was an amazing film, and it did so many things right. And this film is made by people who just don't seem to understand what made The Exorcist so great, because there's nothing here which makes you think it was pulled from that film. It just feels like someone really just trying to butcher everything we saw from the original movie back in, 50 years ago now. And oh my goodness, yeah, this was just such an awful movie. I mean, I don't know if they're going to make another film, like where do they go from here? Oh my goodness. I even just remembered that when it came to the exorcism, the whole neighborhood watch were involved. I just remember sort of face palming at that moment, like, oh my word, what am I watching here? So that's my list for the top 5 worst films of 2023. Do let me know your lists in the comments below. I'll be very intrigued to see how they differ. Also, we'll be doing a top 10 most anticipated films for 2024, so do keep an eye out for that video. That should be coming out in the very near future. But in the meantime, if you want to watch another video on screen, we do have my top 5 best movies of 2023.